What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be having a deep look at the LMGs in Black Ops 6 to see which one is best for different scenarios. We've already done this with assault rifles as well as SMGs. Essentially, we're just pulling out all of the important stats and comparing these side by side. So if you guys missed those episodes, I will leave them linked down below. And let's just dive right into this LMG episode with the time to kill ranking. And just looking at the raw time to kill in the maximum damage range, the fastest killing LMG is the PU-21 at 240 milliseconds, and it's worth noting that is a better time to kill than most of the SMGs in point blank ranges, and yet this also extends out to a very impressive range that we'll look at in a little bit. So raw time to kill wise, this gun kills incredibly fast for this game. Then we've got the XMG, which is also quite fast at 258 milliseconds, and then finally we have the GPMG. This is the slowest of the LMGs. However, it's still very solid, definitely faster than most of the assault rifles out there at 264 milliseconds. So raw time to kill wise, these LMGs all kill very quickly. However, there's a big caveat to this, and that is every one of these LMGs has a pre-fire delay. And interestingly, this pre-fire delay is usually to simulate an open bolt, but even the closed bolt LMG has this pre-fire delay. And when we add that into the equation, the PU-21 has the slowest pre-fire delay at 60 milliseconds. And this means when you pull the trigger, that first shot doesn't fire until 60 milliseconds later. And therefore, effectively, unless you're already firing the gun, which typically you aren't in a gunfight, your realistic time to kill potential with this is now 300 milliseconds with the PU-21. Then with both the XMG and the GPMG-7, they have a pre-fire delay of roughly 50 milliseconds, which takes those time to kill values a little bit over 300 milliseconds. Which, to be fair, that's not a ridiculously slow time to kill in this game or anything. That's still respectable enough, but it definitely is something to consider, and these don't perform quite as amazing as you might think just looking at the raw time to kill values. In either case, next up, let's have a look at our ranges, and all of these LMGs perform really well when it comes to range, as you would expect out of an LMG, but the best in the category is the XMG. This one's 4-shot kill range extends out to over 60 meters. That's going to take care of almost every gunfight you'll ever find yourself in, within regular multiplayer at least. But then with the GPMG-7, its maximum damage range, which is a 5-shot kill, but it's got a faster fire rate, this one extends just over 55 meters, and then the PU-21 has the worst of the ranges, with a 4-shot kill potential of just over 45 meters. Which honestly, most of your gunfights are still likely going to be falling within that range. Now of course, all of that is just looking at body shots. What about headshots without the CHF barrels? With this starting it off with the PU-21, in its maximum damage range, headshots are useless without the CHF barrel. It's always going to be a 4-shot kill, even if all 4 hit the head. However, in its minimum damage range, its 5-shot kill range, if you land 3 headshots mixed in with a body shot, you can get a 4-shot kill. Then with the XMG, in its maximum damage range, we're capable of getting a 3-shot kill with this for 172 millisecond time to kill, which is crazy fast, but every single one of those bullets needs to hit the head, so it's not really all that practical in most situations. Also, at a distance, 3 headshots will cut that down to a 4-shot kill. And then finally, with the GPMG-7, once again, in that maximum damage range, if you mix 3 headshots with a body shot, you can cut that down to a 4-shot kill now for a time to kill of 198 milliseconds. Again, not super viable most of the time. It's kind of hard to consistently land 3 out of 4 shots to the head, but if you can manage it, it will help you. Overall, I would say if you're not using the CHF barrel, I wouldn't worry about aiming for the head all that much, unless of course you are going for the camo challenges. After that, let's have a look at another really important stat to compare here. This is recoil between these LMGs. Keeping in mind that for these tests, I'm just firing 30 rounds with each of these, just for consistency's sake. It's easier to look at a 30-round recoil plot than a 100-round recoil plot. And as you can see here, the PU-21, I would say, has the worst recoil out of all of these, because it does have a lot more overall horizontal recoil. It zigzags a little bit. Plus, those initial shots that you fire, there's pretty big gaps between those, so it actually has fairly high initial recoil to deal with. And I've noticed this in-game as well. This is the hardest to control in my experience as well, and hitting people at really long ranges is more difficult with the PU-21 compared to the others. With the XMG, the initial shots that you fire kick basically straight upward, which is really nice. There is a little bit of side-to-side bounce, and there are some little jumps in there as well. So I wouldn't say this thing's like laser accurate, but it's definitely easier to control than the PU-21. And then finally, with the GPMG-7, we have the smallest gaps between shots, which is nice, but it does tend to drift toward the left. So that is something to consider. You may want to put some horizontal recoil control attachments on there to help correct that. And if you do that, this gun's surprisingly easy to control, especially when you consider its very fast fire rate. Now after that, I do want to have a quick look at the iron sight comparison between these, just to see if it's really worth using an optic. I'd say with LMGs, the playstyle is generally going to be very well suited to using an optic, but I still think it's worth taking a look at this iron sight comparison. And overall, I would say the PU-21 has the cleanest iron sights, but it also has a lot of obstruction on your screen. compared to something like the XMG, which is quite skinny and doesn't really take up much of your screen, which is a nice upside with that gun if you're using iron sights. After that, let's move on to our handling comparison, and this is typically where LMGs don't do too well. When it comes to our aim down sight time, all of these are quite slow, but the fastest of them is the PU-21 at 435 milliseconds, whereas the slowest is the GPMG at 460 milliseconds. Then when it comes to our sprint out times, surprisingly, they're actually not that bad, especially looking at the tactical sprint out times. I expected them to be worse than they are. Now, that's not to say that they're great or competitive with assault rifles and SMGs. You're still going to have a sprint out time slower than the other classes, but not by as big of a margin as we typically see with LMGs. After that, I wanted to take a look at our default magazine capacity, since that is quite important with LMGs, and I was surprised to see basically no correlation between our default magazine capacity and our default aim down sight time. In fact, the LMG with the smallest magazine capacity by default, the GPMG-7, has the slowest aim down sight time, and typically you'd expect that to be opposite, because when you put magazine attachments on, the size of the magazine typically has an effect on how fast you aim down sight. And then finally, let's have a look at our reload add times, which are all very slow, but especially the XMG. That's a painfully slow reload time at 6.73 seconds. So definitely something to consider. You may want to try some of the magazine attachments that noticeably improve those reload times. And this just leaves us with one final section to compare here, and these are our mobility stats. And this time around for LMGs, all of these were quite accurate. There might have been like a little bit of rounding that took place, but they're all very accurate, unlike with the SMG episode. And when it comes to our base walking speed, all of them are quite slow, but the PU-21 is a little bit faster. It's the same story with our sprint speed. The PU-21 is just a little bit faster. Then for our tactical sprint speed, once again, the PU-21 comes out on top, but it's tied with the GPMG-7 in this case. And the XMG is just a little bit slower. And then with our aim walking speed, it's the same story there. The GPMG-7 and the PU-21 are a little faster than the XMG, but honestly, they're all so slow that it doesn't really matter, since that difference in aim walking speed will be negligible when you're moving so slowly anyway. And there we go. That's going to wrap it up for the comparison of all of the important stats with these LMGs that we've currently got in the game. And when it comes to which one is best, once again, I don't think there's necessarily a clear winner here, but I do want to share some of my experiences and my opinions on this, based on my initial playtime with these LMGs. And I've got to say, the PU-21 just doesn't really appeal to me. I don't like this LMG all that much. I feel like it relies a lot on attachments to get that recoil under control. And while it does have a great base time to kill potential, it also has the slowest pre-fire delay in the LMG category. And I find that to be noticeable. A lot of the times when I'm reacting to a gunfight and I pull the trigger, I just feel like I'm waiting a really long time for that first shot to go off, and that's often too long, and I find myself getting killed, and it's really frustrating using that. Now, that's not to say that I haven't had any success with that gun. It's just out of all of the LMGs, it is my least favorite. The XMG, on the other hand, I find to be a really nice, great all-arounder. I quite like the XMG. Super easy to use, quite versatile for an LMG. And then finally, the GPMG-7, I honestly find this to be my favorite LMG in the game right now. I was very pleasantly surprised to see how accurate it is considering the fire rate. Yes, the handling is super slow, but you can make up for that with some attachments, as well as your playstyle. You can't be playing this like it's an SMG or anything. But I have found quite a bit of success with that so far, and I do find it quite enjoyable to use. Now, of course, those are just my opinions based on the stats, as well as my initial playtime with these LMGs, and I'd love to hear what you guys think in those comments down below. Out of these three LMGs, which one is your personal favorite to use? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.